about to get started. Everybody can take their seats. Good afternoon. Mason, we good to go?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Christian Gant. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Office of Attorney General. Also co-chair of the Executive Work Group along with Willie Flowers from the Office of the Public Defender. We're going to start today's meeting now with introductions from our introduction and opening from our principals first.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I am so happy to see everyone here today. Thank you for coming together and driving out here so that we can do this important work. I'm not going to say much, but I'm really excited for us to get started, to hear how we have started in this work, and also to talk about some of our guidelines, our bylaws, and how we're going to continue to be in this space, but most importantly, how we're going to work together. So welcome, and I look forward to all the things that we'll talk about today.
Thank you, Defender Garkey. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Attorney General Anthony Brown, and I do have my script from the postponed meeting, so I should start by saying Happy New Year. I know we're well into the new year now with almost 2 months behind us, but I want to thank you, the members of the Collaborative, for your work since our launch late last year, and others who have participated in the work. I'm looking forward to hearing from the work groups on the work plans. I want to thank each and every one of you who reviewed the guidelines. We sent the draft around, I think, sometime in January. Got a lot of good feedback on the guidelines, which we'll hear more about later. How to make them more inclusive, geared towards and oriented towards consensus building and the like. So I'm really excited about it. This is not about process, but process is important to get the good product. Again, I want to thank everyone who participated in the work of looking at the guidelines. So with that, just welcome, and I look forward to, again, hearing the work plans, our discussion around that, and going through the guidelines. With that, I'll turn it back over to Christian.
Thank you. We're continuing with some introductions. So we've only got 3 mics, so please share your mics. We can start with Debbie, and then you go clockwise, and then after that we can go to our.
But it's not practical to handle to pass this whole thing around. Maybe you want to take it off of that, or if people want to use their inside voice.
Oh, take it off.
Right? Okay.
We need the microphones
Does everybody like Taylor Swift?
to stream.
No, I My name is Debbie, and I have twin 14-year-olds. So I'm from the Office of the Public Defender. I'm the Director of Special Litigation in Baltimore City, and I am a co-chair of the Law Enforcement Policies and Practices with my co-chairs over there, Phil and Heather Warnke, who will introduce himself shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Leonard Howie, Deputy Attorney General, co-chair of the Education, Workforce Development, and Equal Opportunities Work Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Price. I am co-chair, right along with Leonard here, on the Workforce Development, Economic Opportunities, and Education Work Group.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm Willie Flowers, co-chair of the Executive Work Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharice Cass. I am one of the co-chairs for the Health and Human Services Co-Committee.
Good afternoon, Musa Eubanks with the Office of the Attorney General, also co-chair of the Health and Human Services Committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Collins, Director of Social Work at the Maryland Office of the Public Defender, co-chair of the Health and Human Services Committee.
Hi, I'm Terrence Nash. I'm the Deputy Director at Monty, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, representing Deputy Mayor Barksdale.
Good afternoon, Charles Adams, Executive Director of Restorative Justice and Practice Institute at Bowie State University.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn McGuire. I am the president of the Maryland chapter for the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives.
Good afternoon, everyone. Craig Jernigan, the Regional Director for Youth Advocate Programs, providing services for youth and adults in Maryland and DC.
Good afternoon, I'm Phil Crone, co-chair of the Prison, Jail, and Detention Reform Committee, and also happy to be a member of Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform.
Good afternoon, I'm Yanisha Norris. I'm here on behalf of Lou Giesel for the Administrative Office of Crimes.
Hi folks, my name is Jordan Gilmore. I'm the representative of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development.
Hi everyone, Jason Perkins Cohen, Deputy Secretary of Maryland Labor, representing Portia Wu.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Hilliard, the Acting Director of Government Relations for the Office of the Public Defender and the co-chair to the Prison, Jail, and Detention Facility Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, Phil Pickus, Office of the Attorney General. I am a co-chair on the Law Enforcement Policies and Practices Committee.
Good afternoon, Heather Morgan. I'm the Executive Director at the Center for Criminal Justice Reform at the University of Baltimore School of Law and another co-chair on the Law Enforcement Policies and Practices Committee.
Hello, Nate Bayless. I am the Director of the Juvenile Justice Strategy Group at the Annie Casey Foundation, and I'm a co-chair of the Juvenile Justice Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, my name is Camila Reynolds Dominguez. I'm a policy advocate at Free State Justice. We are an LGBTQ advocacy organization.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Martz. I'm here for the Maryland Criminal Defense Attorneys Association, and I'm also part of the Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Melvin Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of Turnaround Tuesday, which is a jobs movement, and I'm co-chair of the Promoting Successful Reentry.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Sassani. I'm Director of the Public Defender's Incarceration Initiative and one of the co-chairs of the Promoting Successful Reentry Committee.
Good afternoon everyone, I am Janae Fountain and I am an Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. I'm also a co-chair in the Promoting Successful Reentry Committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Stuart Nathan from the Office of the Attorney General. I'm one of 3 co-chairs of the Prison, Jail, and Detention Facility Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, it's Carl Pop here. I'm with the Office of the Attorney General. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Juvenile Justice Reform Committee.
And good afternoon, I'm Karen Seegers. I'm a youth defender in Anne Arundel County with the Office of the Public Defender, and I'm the co-chair of the Juvenile Justice Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Sean Mukherjee. I'm with the Office of the Public Defender, and I am the co-chair of the Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Katie Dorian, Chief of the Criminal Division at the AG's office and co-chair of the Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camille Blake Fowle. I'm here representing the Secretary for the Department of Health, Laura Guerrero Scott, and I am an honorary co-chair for the Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you.
What happens when you come late, you have to sit next to the teacher. I'm Dave Schwab, DJ as secretary.
Thanks everyone. So just real quickly, just reviewing our agenda for today. We've done our introductions. Next, we're going to hear short presentations from each work group on their work plans. Just for everyone, please limit your presentation to 3 to 5 minutes, and we're trying to hopefully limit questions to 3 to 5 minutes. So 10 minutes per group, hopefully. And then after that, we're going to go over the guidelines, which you all should have received electronically, and then we'll adjourn. So without any ado, the Education, Workforce Development, and Economic Opportunity Committee is ready. We can get started. The clicker is ready for you.
I know that you guys probably can't. You all probably can't see it because of the lights off. Okay, thank you. First, let me just say this. I speak for my co-chair here, Leonard Howie and Deborah Carr, just saying that we come into this work with great expectation that the work that we're going to do here in this collaborative is going to move the needle towards ending mass incarceration. So we're extremely excited about that. But as you can see, I am Melissa Price. I'm with the Public Defender's Office, co-chairing with Leonard Howie and Deborah Carr. I will not read you our vision statement because it's very wordy and I only have about 3 minutes. So these are our specific areas. And I'm going to jump around to a number of different slides. But before I get started, the workforce development and economic opportunities areas, we decided that it was wise to merge those two groups preliminarily because of the overlapping ideas. They kind of walk hand in hand together. So it just made sense to start off with these specific areas merged into one subgroup. As the work grows though, if the members of the group decide that there should be a specific area that cuts off or has its separate subgroup, then we'll address it when we get to that place. But for now, it just simply made sense to combine it. And then we'll get into the specific areas of each of, for this specific work group. We intend to identify barriers that employers and training organizations face in providing workforce skills training for marginalized men. We intend to identify sectors that give best opportunity for personal growth and sustainable employment in the tech and healthcare areas. Obviously, those areas are not going anywhere. The key thought here is that we're trying to create career paths for these individuals, not just get them jobs. We also intend to identify Maryland-based entities both in the public and private sectors that will provide training programs for in-demand jobs to marginalized participants, and the same to identify Maryland-based entities, private and public, that could provide skills training to create a prison-to-employment pipeline. This is the timeline for the subgroup of workforce development and economic opportunities, and it's going to be the same timeline for the subgroup of education. So we intend by March 29 to 1, identify stakeholders, subject matter experts to come in and speak to us about specific areas in this subgroup, address any issues that we may see to kind of educate us on this specific topic. By May 31st, we intend to have done research, done our data collection. By July 26th, we intend to obtain and interpret those findings so that by the fall of 2024, we're preparing our final recommendations for the collaborative. Education, which is the second subgroup. Same timeline. Our purpose with this specific subgroup is for us to identify the barriers that are present in education, address them, specifically those barriers that impact Black and other marginalized youth before involvement with the criminal legal system. We will examine the barriers in the following areas, and I'll go over those specific areas for you. We thought that it was wise when it comes to education to focus on prevention. And there are other work groups that are also dealing with specifically the DJS work, parole and probation work group, or the DJS work group. I can't remember what work group that name is, but there's going to be overlap. But for now, we intend to look at areas that we can hone in on that will help our kids from getting on a trajectory before they even enter the criminal legal system. We're going to address gaps in basic literacy skills, look at the impact that a student's home life has on their educational stability and academic progress. We're going to look at equitable and effective use of school disciplinary powers. We intend to also look at education funding priorities, examining the impact that teacher training, teacher pay, and the availability of physical and program resources have on the ability to address the needs of youth trending toward the criminal legal system. We also intend to look at career technical education. I think there was a lot of emphasis put on our kids going to college, but this is an area that we need to tap into. So we're going to look at career technical education, make sure that our kids are aware of these specific programs, make sure that they know how to enroll, and make sure after enrollment there is completion in these programs. Existing pipelines from high school directly to the government, whether that be local, state, or federal government employment for our kids. We're also going to focus on some of the traditional CTE programs such as HVAC, plumbing, electrician, and how we can expand those specific trades that we're used to having in the schools, but also look at new areas that are up and coming, specifically wind turbines, energy, and electrical charging stations. And this is one area that I'm specifically excited about. We intend to look at how trauma affects our kids and how they perform in the school after that trauma. We're going to look at spaces that provide therapy and healing for our kids. And that's pretty much it. This is, again, it's the same timeline for education. We're gonna identify stakeholders, subject matter experts, so that we can prepare that final recommendation. And this is just a list of the preliminary organizations that we intend to solicit so that they can edify us in this specific area. And this is a list of all of the members of our work group. And that's all I have. Thank you. I hope that was under 5 minutes. I'm not sure.
So we'll open up the questions. We'll open it up to questions. I was looking at your, I think, list of resources and who you're reaching out to. I think about the blueprint for Maryland's future and equity investments in education. Do you intend to have someone kind of come in and give an overview of the blueprint and see where there's opportunities to work within the blueprint?
Oh, absolutely.
What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. Leonard, you want to jump in if you want to jump in.
First of all, I must acknowledge that when you look at our work plan and see our work group members, it's clear that everybody, it's like all the work groups here, people are coming in with a wealth of experience in their areas, and experience sometimes means agendas. But what we really tried to do was to tap into what the true overriding issues are and take a deep dive into understanding what the issues are, bringing in our perspectives, but not necessarily bringing in what we in our individual capacities are interested in, trying to really embrace the collaborative nature. So your question about the blueprint, that actually aligns well with the comment that within our group, there's a lot going on in the administration in these areas, whether it's in the workforce side of the house, the education side, commerce, economic development side. They will definitely be a part of the presentations that we will be engaged in to understand what the priorities of the administration are, so that we know where the activities are taking place, and we can really shortcut some of the connections that we know we need to make with our group and the work that's already underway. And in many cases, that's well funded, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But part of this process is that the deeper we get into understanding the issues, of course, there are going to be new threads that pop up. And that's really the beauty of a collaborative process.
Question. So, in terms of high consensus items or low-hanging fruit that may be there right now, is the committee pursuing, for example, the restorative schools proposal that comes from some of the Blueprint for Maryland Futures organizers, and also this year there are a number of bills that are seeking to criminalize or enhance the level of classification of student misconduct on school grounds, calling a simple assault on school grounds a crime of violence, or otherwise enhancing penalties for a fight that where a teacher or school employee was assaulted. Are you looking at those currently pending bills?
I don't believe we're going to be addressing any of those low-hanging fruits. I think that was the consensus that we had in our work group because of the time frame. We're looking at longevity and addressing some of the challenges. So if something comes, excuse me, if rules and laws and procedures are changed, we can address it at a later time, but I feel like in order to be able to give substantive input, it's just too short of a notice, if that makes any sense.
I'll just add that the concept of low-hanging fruit, that's interesting in and of itself. Having recently come from working in economic workforce development in Baltimore County and working with the Blueprint, for example, there's a lot of work that needs to be done aligning the interests of the education system, the workforce system, and the community college system, quite frankly. So while we may think something is very straightforward, I guarantee you our partners do not. So we're not in a position yet to opine with true certainty that these are the issues that are going to be most important to us. We really do have to understand what the issues are, what everybody's positions are, and then to seek common ground there.
Do I need the mic? Yes.
How about now? Yep. So thanks for the presentation. Department of Labor, super excited to participate with you all. I'm glad we have an opportunity to present. Just a couple of quick thoughts. One, if there's a possibility to a friendly amendment to, I think, the first bullet where you talk about the barriers to entry on the community-based programs. Public system has some barriers to entry as well, so I'd be happy to throw us in as where we have unintentionally, hopefully, created barriers to accessing our programs and services. You're welcome. Sorry to have to say it. Second, your reference to CTE, there's actually a committee of the Governor's Workforce Board called the CTE Committee. It's actually meeting this week. It'd be great to tap into them. They're really focused on this great opportunity that the Blueprint provides, and they've got a lot of stuff to share, so just as a resource. And then the last point would just be, there are a lot of challenges in our current environment, and I recognize that. I wouldn't want us to lose that there are some good things happening, and it would be, if you would be amenable to it, to make sure we don't lose that good stuff. We don't throw that out. Let's lift that up, expand it where it makes sense. So I wasn't sure that was incorporated, but I would suggest it be the thing.
You know, Jason, I think that's a really important point, because the good things that we know work, not everybody knows about. So this is obviously an environment, a process where we can capture things that do work and make sure that that information is out there.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Next, we have a presentation from the Prison Jail Detention Facility Reform Work Group.
We need it on the microphone though, because we're streaming.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Hi.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, hi, I'm Elizabeth Hilliard. I introduced myself previously. We are, and this is Judge Phil Carew. We are co-chairs along with Stuart Nathan of the Prison, Jail, and Detention Committee. Similar to Public Defender Price, I will not belabor our mission statement, but we have a long one as well. Our committee is really excuse me, focused on improving the conditions that our prisons, jails, and detention facilities experience, both for those who are currently incarcerated, the family members and other impacted people in the community, and also the employees who are working at the facilities. I think we probably would have used a slightly bigger font if we had known it would be this small. Apologies. In February, which we have started to do, we still have 3 days left, so I think we're doing all right here. Our goals were to establish our subcommittee meetings and structure and potentially draft and prepare legislation for this legislative session. In May 2024, we are hoping to send out an evaluation of what happened this session, what bills passed, didn't pass that may be impacting the prison, jails, and detention facilities in Maryland, and start to produce surveys from each subcommittee that will highlight areas that we can continue to improve and target in our future efforts. including looking forward to the 2025 legislative session, and regulations, and even sometimes just education is a big issue when it comes to conditions of confinement. We, by September 2024, we will have reports from each of our subcommittee in light of our committee member and stakeholder feedback. And then our goal by January 2025 is to have legislative and policy priorities and reevaluate any informational needs or research that was not conducted in the year of 2024. We have 6 subcommittees, and I won't go into detail, but essentially by May 2024, we have goals that each subcommittee will identify areas of research and needs for more information in May, and then by August, we'll produce some of that research and information. So we have a programming and reentry from day 1 committee, which we've already started coordinating with the reentry subcommittee or the reentry committee to make sure we're not overlapping but coordinating in our efforts. A decarceration and parole subcommittee, a healthcare and conditions of confinement subcommittee, an LGBTQIA population care and PREA compliance subcommittee, and incarcerated persons with sex offense conviction and focusing on their rehabilitation subcommittee, and a jails, local detention, and pretrial subcommittee. And then we did identify 3 areas of sort of legislative priorities that could be addressed this year. We have we've spoken to our members and we've taken surveys, and these are the 3 bills, and there are hyperlinks, which I realize doesn't really help you all watching from home, but the removing the governor from the medical parole process, passing the correctional ombudsman bill, and passing the what we call compassionate release, but the geriatric and medical parole bills. And so our committee has, by over a 2/3 majority, recommended that MEJC consider these for support this legislative session.
So to explain for just a minute why these are high consensus items, removing the governor from medical parole, there was a bill passed in 2021 that basically took the governor out of parole for anyone with a life sentence. And it was sort of a technical oversight that I have not heard anyone disagree with. That he also is not involved in parole decisions of lifers in general. He shouldn't be involved in parole decisions of lifers who are getting medical parole. The compassionate release one, to go to the far end, geriatric or medical parole, is almost identical to what was recommended in the report of the Justice Reinvestment Coordinating Council in 2016, and for some reason it did not get passed. But Maryland's parole rate for folks who are in that category, elderly, age 60 and up, is something like 28%. The national average is something like 40%. So this would be a way consistent with public safety, according to the original Justice Reinvestment reports, to save huge amounts of money, shrink our prisons, and then have that money to reinvest in things that would work better. The correctional ombudsman is a new bill, but it is a high consensus one, supported not only by the Attorney General and the Public Defender, but also by the Black Legislative Caucus, the Women's Caucus, and every advocacy group that we have been able to come across. It is not officially opposed by the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, although the department has a few concerns about details, but we are pretty confident that it can pass, and we hope that it will find justice reinvestment funding. The bill starts out small, with a small budgetary impact, and would increase over the course of time as we hope budgets would get better.
Thank you. And these are our committee members right now. This is very difficult to read, I apologize, but we can happily send around our member list to the MEJC committee members as well.
questions?
Thank you. Does the healthcare, I think it's called healthcare and conditions of confinement subcommittee, does that also deal with the mental health aspect as well as physical health?
Yes, absolutely. We're looking not only at the mental health care that's provided while individuals are incarcerated, but also the impact that the conditions of confinement have on individuals' mental health. So for example, the use of restrictive housing and other currently employed decisions and practices and how they impact individuals' mental health.
Okay, great. We should definitely connect because that's some overlap with our committee as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I serve as a member of this committee, including on the LGBTQIA+ subcommittee, and we've already dug into a world of really important subtopics related to this effort. And one of the things that Camila and others that serve on this subcommittee and I had discussed in the last meeting was sort of how needed and critical a similar effort was, arguably, in almost any of the MEJC committees. So I just wanted to flag that there, because in the work that we had, we were talking about overlap with LGBTQIA+ issues with law enforcement and a number of other issues. So I'm already thinking about that with respect to our committee, and just wanted to put it out as food for thought for others as well.
Do we know if there are any capital budget plans for facilities, and whether the administration is putting any resources into rebuilding or seriously repairing the facilities?
I personally have some suspicions, but we have not, as a committee, dug into that and developed numbers or details. Maybe, Stu, do you want to comment on that as our co-chair from the department?
You're absolutely correct that the committee itself has not discussed that issue, but I'm not sure whether this is included, but I know there's been discussion about, those of you, well, I'm sure most of you know about when the old detention center was torn down in Baltimore City. There's been a lot of discussion about what, if anything, will be used with that property. So there have been a number of issues discussed, one of which involves potentially construction of a therapeutic treatment center on that site. There's been money, plenty of money has been allocated in past budgets. It hasn't really moved very far so far, but there is discussion about use of that property and treatment facility being built. Specifically, I guess it would be devoted to substance abuse, mental health treatment, etc.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a presentation from the Promoting Successful Reentry and Preventing Reincarceration Work Group.
Good afternoon again. I am Janae Fountain, and I'm here with my colleagues and co-chairs, Melvin Senti as well as Melvin Wilson. And we are the chairs of the Promoting Successful Reentry and Preventing Reincarceration Committee. Our mission is to develop comprehensive strategies to prepare incarcerated individuals for release, facilitate the release of rehabilitated individuals, and support returning citizens as they leave jails and prisons with the goal of maximizing their success and minimizing recidivism. And we have 3 areas of focus, and we decided to break that up into 3 subcommittees. First, preparing for release, what can and should be done within prisons and jails while individuals are incarcerated to better prepare for them for the day that they are released. Facilitating release. Subcommittee, what can and should be done to improve or expand legal mechanisms to facilitate the release of non-dangerous rehabilitated individuals and thereby reduce prison population. And the post-release subcommittee, what can and should be done to better support individuals during and after their release from incarceration to maximize their chances of success and minimize their risk of recidivism. So what we did here, we have assigned a chair to each subcommittee. So I am the chair of the Preparing for Release subcommittee. Brian is the chair of the Facilitating Release committee, and then Melvin is the chair of the Post-Release subcommittee. And then we, oh, no, this is the wrong slideshow. Give me 1 second. Luckily, I already had it up, so give me 1 second. So we have 3 key groups within each subcommittee, and we call them group issues. So we have 1, 2, and 3 group issues for each subcommittee. For example, my committee is the Preparing for Release subcommittee. So our first issue we'll be dealing with is family and community support. How do we build those support systems to better prepare individuals for when they are released? Healthcare, preparing them for when they're released. Musa recently gave us some really great information with what MDH and DPSCS is doing regarding healthcare for incarcerated individuals. And then community organizations would be my third group, our third key issue that my group will be dealing with. And then as far as it relates to the Facilitating Release subcommittee, their 3 issues that they will be tackling will be improving the parole system, expanding authority of courts to modify sentences, examining clemency as a means to de-incarcerate, and then the post-release committee will be focusing also on 3 issues: housing, parole and probation fees, and jobs. And I believe this should at least be there, okay. So far we have convened 2 committee meetings, and some of our subcommittees have had varying amounts of committees meetings. Right now we're working on our group 1 issues. Like I said, our group 1 issue is family support and community support. So at our last subcommittee meeting, we had guest speakers come, experts, stakeholders, come to our meeting and discuss issues, give ideas that we could implement, things that we could bring to MEJC, and that's what we're doing right now. And by March, we hope to each subcommittee have our group 1 issue, have recommendations to present to MEJC for their consideration. And then going into our second issues for each subcommittee, we would hope to have those to the MEJC by May 2024. And then for our last issue per subcommittee, we would hope to have recommendations to provide to MEJC by August of 2024. And I think they've already passed, but we also had a list of all of our committee members. We are probably the largest group. We have quite a few individuals on our committee. And if anybody has any questions for us, we are here to answer them.
I have a question down here. First of all, congratulations joining our new Civil Rights Enforcement Division in the Office of the Attorney General. Renee was on the Walter Lomax Act program and it did wonderful things to connect wrongfully incarcerated people with the, you can never really compensate fully for that, but the work that you did was tremendous. My question, I know that you can't sort of boil down to one number, to measure the success of reentry and preventing reincarceration. But when you look at states and the recidivism rate, and Maryland is, doesn't do well at all. We're north of 40%. Some states are lower than 20%. I guess my question is, to what extent will your committee be doing sort of like a 50-state survey, or at least a survey of those states that have, much lower recidivism rates than ours, to see what best practices that they've adopted, and see whether or not they can be tailored or applied here in Maryland.
That's absolutely something that we are committed to doing, and looking to see what other states are doing, how they've been able to, lower their prison population, reduce recidivism. So it's definitely something we'll be looking into. We have two fantastic researchers on our committee as well. And these two individuals know a lot as well. And so we're definitely gonna put all of our brains together to get that information as well. And we know, of course, having a successful reentry absolutely helps lower recidivism. So we're definitely excited to tackle that.
I just wanted to offer, Maryland Department of Labor would be happy to participate in your committee. This may surprise some people, but correctional ed is actually within Maryland Labor. Training that happens behind the fence, also us. We've got reentry coordinators, work closely with Melvin. So please, I know that you've got a lot of great members and zooming along, but offer ourselves up.
That's a great idea. The one thing that recently came up at our last subcommittee meeting was the reentry navigators. I worked with them in my previous position as Walter Lomax Act Assistant Attorney General, but it keeps coming up in my meetings because you all collaborate a lot with the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, so it's always coming up. So I think that's a great idea. I'll definitely be in contact.
Thank you, everyone. Next, we will have the Juvenile Justice Reform Work Group presenting.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am Erin Seegears, and I'm a youth defender with the Office of the Public Defender and a co-chair along with Carl and Nate for the Juvenile Justice Reform Work Group. Our committee mission statement is to identify and address the causes of racial disparities that result in the disproportionate representation of youth of color within the juvenile and criminal justice systems. The call is a weighty call. The issues are very deep and are very wide. So, like most of the subgroups, it sounds like we have decided to divide and conquer. We have a really wonderful group within us that have a diverse experiences and are very enthusiastic and are ready to tackle this. And we have done that through dividing up our work into 3 different areas of focus, and with that 3 different work groups within our broader work group. You can read the areas of focus that we have here, but to put it simply, we are focusing 1 on prevention. So that includes the school to prison pipeline, and we have a number of educators, a number of people who are invested in education and the issue of the school to prison pipeline, so it definitely will cover that. But in addition to that, we are also looking at how can we support families, can we do in the community to really hold ourselves accountable to serve and to help our children so that they don't end up in this situation in the first place. So I anticipate that will include working with our other subgroups such as the mental health work group and other ones that are presenting today. Our second area of focus is to look at the racial disparities within the system itself. So we know there are several different decision points in the juvenile justice system, from intake to what cases get prosecuted, which ones don't get prosecuted, to the adjudication, to the disposition, which is the sentencing, to what happens on probation, to which case gets into placement. At every one of those stages, we see that disparate impact, and so we're looking at each one of those stages and seeing how we can address that issue within the system, working closely with DJS as a partner to see what we can do about that as well. And finally, our last area of focus regards children who are charged as adults. And so that involves just the whole system of charging youth automatically as adults, but also taking a look at how many people are in our current criminal system who are currently in prisons and in jails who were given lengthy sentences as children. We know that is a huge area where we see disparate impact as well, and so we are looking into that as well as our third area of focus and our third subgroup. Our plan, we have already divided into our 3 different subgroups, and thankfully, again, we have a wide group of great different experiences. So we have people who have expertise in each one of those 3 focus areas that we spoke of. And our call from here is to really dig into the research and the data. So first, we are hoping to just gather and look at where are we seeing the racial disparities in these 3 different areas. We want to know what the problems are specifically so that we know how we can best address it. From there, we are also very interested in looking at the history of the policies, laws, and practices that led to where we are today. We all know that none of these issues came up overnight, and so we want to see how they started. We want to look into, what has been going on that got us to this place, and we also do want to do a kind of lay of the land to see where we're looking at now. And that includes both, what are the issues that we're seeing now, but also, as someone mentioned before, what are the things that are working now? What are the underfunded, underutilized resources that we have in the community that we really need to be looking into and expanding and investing in? And from there, once we have a greater understanding of what is happening, our plan from there is to gather both from the data and the research, and then from the expertise of our members to draft and make our proposals for each of our focus areas. So here's a list of our committee members, and I'll end by saying already we are seeing the growing enthusiasm to be a part of this. And so every day, every week, I feel like we are making more connections and more partnerships, which is wonderful. And I also just put the call out to you as well, because our area is so broad. It's just the area of youth. Again, there's so much overlap with all the great work that you all are doing, and so we're looking forward to partnering with you all as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions for juvenile justice? Also, I've been told that some of our folks online have a hard time hearing, so please make sure you put an extra effort to project into the mics for our live stream folks. Thank you. I saw a question.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Hi, are you having any conversations with anybody who's also attached to the JDAI, the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative? Because I think a lot of the same issues are being raised. Oh, good.
Hey, Terrence.
I couldn't see it.
I'm one of the chairs. Yeah, I'm in both.
I don't know. That's right. Okay, thank you.
I do that all day.
Any other questions? All right.
I heard 2 words that were kind of music to my ears, and second only to the 2 words of lived experience, and that's research and data. And I just wanted to kind of emphasize that, because at the end of the day, regardless of what our recommendations are, whether it's budget, legislative, alignment of existing resources, education, practices and protocols and institutions, there are policymakers who are not a part of the collaborative, but will be very interested in the work that we do and will be influenced and shaped by that. And our recommendations will only be good as the research and data that supports it. So whether it's research and data about what's happening in Maryland, or it's research and data by doing the 50-state survey and what practices work and what's not working, coupled with the lived experiences that we're bringing to the collaborative with our impacted persons who are part of the collaborative, the work that you're doing in your work groups in the community, hearing and listening to people. Those 4 words together is going to be really the strength and the power that's going to fuel our recommendations. So thank you for mentioning research and data.
All right. Research and data again.
Well, it's actually 3 words, but if you bundle.
There we go. Research and data. All right, next, criminal law sentencing reform.
Good afternoon. I'm Sean Mukherjee. Oh, all right, sorry about that. There we go. I'm Sean Mukherjee. I'm from the Public Defender's Office. I am the co-chair along with Katie Dorian over there and Judge Alexander Williams of the Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform Committee. Skip ahead here to the first slide. I want to talk for a moment about our mission statement. We are going to be looking at various areas of the present state of criminal law and sentencing policy here in Maryland, as well as other states, and we're going to look at a lot of data out there, Mr. Attorney General, and we're going to go ahead and see how the application of that data to our current policies reflects areas where we can seek reform that will reduce incarceration and over-incarceration, but also make the system itself more equitable. We're going to look specifically to minority populations and communities of color, and we're going to try and craft a broad spectrum of policy and legal changes. Our areas of focus are the criminal law, kind of obviously from our name, also the criminal procedure and sentencing rules, law, and policy that apply in our courts and our system every day. We have a ambitious timeline that we're going to be working on, depicted up here. But importantly, I'll talk about these important dates that we have. First and foremost, and we've already begun this process of collaborating with at least 2 other committees that we believe have crossover coverage with some of our areas that we're going to be dealing with. Those being the Law Enforcement Reform Committee and the Reentry Committee. And we've already had preliminary meetings with both of those committees to effect some crossover analysis of our subject areas. We came up with a list of early action and high consensus recommendations that we've already submitted to the overall collaborative. Those should be hopefully making their way around to the group, and we're hoping that those can be, that action can be taken on those items fairly soon, hence the early action part of that. Some of those recommendations include alterations to the present state of Maryland rules involving violations of probation warrants, bond review procedures, eliminating the penalty of incarceration for certain offenses, including some offenses out of the education article, altering the sentence modification rules, and some other things. Some of which overlap current legislation that's currently pending before the legislature, but also items that are before the Rules Committee or going to be before the Rules Committee, and hopefully this collaborative can add its voice to that. We also intend to undertake a public forum, an additional public forum, to hear the voice of people who have been affected by our current state of the criminal law here in Maryland, and to get suggestions and recommendations for what areas we really should be focused on for our long-term data analysis and ultimate areas for addressing with recommendations at the end of our committee process. Just again for Mr. Attorney General, we've got a separate item here for a June deadline to do some data analysis. We intend to engage in a 50-state review. Katie Dorian and I have discussed the idea of getting data from a number of different states, especially ones with similar procedural postures to our own, to analyze how they do things and then bring that back to the group to reflect on and derive some changes that we can make or recommend making here in Maryland. By August, we hope to have an outline of those recommendations ready for the committee to review and get some consensus on, and ultimately forward to the overall collaborative. And then we intend to engage in a bill drafting and rule drafting process for the final long-term recommendations by sometime in October, So that way we'll have plenty of time for the next legislative session and the Rules Committee meetings following that deadline. Here are a list of the early action items that we already talked about. They don't quite match the recommendations that we've sent up to the overall collaborative at this point because we've had additional discussions since when the PowerPoint was made. But largely it covers what we've said, and I'm happy to address any questions on that subject. There's a list of committee members after this slide. I'm just going to leave this up in case any of the questions have to do with what our early action recommendations are. Thank you.
Thanks. There's the whole body of reforms that people have undertaken to limit technical violations on both probation and parole, both the kinds of things you can get violated for, how much time you can spend if you get violated, and also merit time off of supervision if you're not getting violated. Pew has done a lot of work on that. It's like Missouri, it's Louisiana, it's New York. It's a big range of states that have very, like Missouri, I think it's 15,000 fewer people get technically violated a year based on what they did. And you can imagine capturing those savings and actually putting them into the kinds of programs that would help people in one of these other committees that's working on reentry. So if you ever want to chat about that, I used to run probation in New York City, and I did a lot of that myself. And the outcomes, surprisingly, the outcomes improved because if people don't think you're just there waiting to pounce on them, they actually might come see their PO and talk about issues they need help with. So just a thought. Thank you, Secretary. I do think that's an area of overlap with our committee and some of the other committees. I do think that's really important. And in all honesty, the technical violations and some of the changes that went through with the Justice Reinvestment Act and extending those and making them a little bit more reasonable than they already are is certainly going to be a focus of our committee. Oh, and we'd be happy to talk with you and have you come speak to our committee anytime.
Use the presentation, saying it's a very fine presentation, but to kind of make a few points. One is, while certainly the work groups should be entrepreneurial and innovative in the ideas and the concepts, and even the presentation, what I would caution just after doing this for 25 years in Annapolis is be careful to the extent that your recommendations are going to require legislative change. And we are going to be recommending legislative change. Bill drafting is a very thorny piece, right? And I'm going to use one example where I think it was mentioned that there was high consensus, and I think there was, around the corrections ombudsman. And the Office of the Attorney General supported that with amendments, right? And we had a major amendment that the original sort of advocates and sponsors had concerns with. We said, you got to take that out of the Office of the Attorney General. I represent the clients who will be on the other end of those investigations. And there's a lot of back and forth. My only concern is the General Assembly spends a lot of time going back and forth on amendments to bills. Where do you put the comma? Where did you cross the T? And then we know that so many good bills in Annapolis don't make it across the finish line because of the bill draft and getting the paragraphs right, et cetera. So all that to say that we're going to have great ideas and concepts, and we want to make sure that they get out to policymakers. The more detail we get into, and not to say that we shouldn't, detail will delay and slow down. So if we were doing the corrections ombudsman bill again, I would say, hey, let's agree on this concept, right? Truly independent, truly resourced. It can take investigations. It needs to be responsive to not only incarcerated persons, but their family. The things that we can broadly agree on. And then where there's not consensus, let's not let that delay us. And then my only concern is when you kind of try to reduce that into a bill, it gets really, really tricky. So I just want to throw that out there. There may be others who have other thoughts about
And Mr. Attorney General, I will say we added as an appendix to our high consensus recommendations some proposed language for I think at least one bill, but also rules changes. And obviously that goes through the Rules Committee process, which hopefully at the very least we can get some movement spurred by the idea of a template of what we presented, where that recommendation is going. But point well taken. And obviously the long term is the most important. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Criminal Law and Sentencing Reform Work Group. Next, we will hear from Health and Human Services.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Good afternoon again, everyone. I failed to mention my title earlier when I came in late, so my apologies. I'm the Chief of Staff for Time Organization, which is a behavioral health organization in Maryland. So I'm happy to present along with my co-chairs, Terry and Musa. We are the Health and Human Services Co-Committee, and we are going to talk about our mission, but we're also going to discuss why we changed our name, because we are originally the Behavioral Health and Human Services Committee. So our mission is to develop plans to expand non-carceral options for Black men in Maryland with mental health and addiction issues. So our original name was changed because we looked at the historical word behavior and how it focused on criminality in Black men as opposed to daily life stressors, trauma, mental health disorders, co-occurring disorders, and the like. And we want to create verbiage where as a community, we are looking at behavioral health as health overall.
All right, our group decided, because it's such a big issue, to sort of break it down into sections. One is, of course, that's before someone has contact with the criminal justice system. Present is obviously someone who's actually in an carceral setting, and then after is sort of post-release. And again, if we do right on the front end, we don't have anything on the back end. First is breaking down barriers, right? And that's addressing and figuring out as a committee, we need to figure out what are the barriers to people seeking mental health care, right? And is it insurance issues? Is it cost issues? Is it a stigma issues? Figuring out what those are and working to eliminate those issues. That's sort of the before piece. The building bridges, and again, like I asked one of the other committees about, is talking about mental health while someone is in prison, right? Think of a toothache, right? A tooth decay you have. If it's left untreated, right? If that person is in prison, needs mental health care and is not getting it, then they're not going to be any better when they get out, and more likely you're going to see recidivism numbers go up. So we want to build those bridges. Last is restoring confidence. So sort of once someone is out, are they going to have access to the care, the mental health treatment, other services, and this is where we probably cross with education and jobs and things like that that they're going to have access to, so that they don't there's no recidivism.
So we want to focus on our tasks, and we really want to focus on the research, right? We want to understand what are the dynamics, what are the barriers to African American, not just men, but African American people, persons of color. Why are they not engaging in services? There are services out there. What are the barriers? So we've started some research. We've got a great researcher, actually one of my social workers from the Public Defender's Office, and we're really looking at what are the barriers, what are the stigmas that are involved, and why persons of color are not accessing or using the current mental health services that are out there. And we are in a series of looking at those researches, the current research right now, deliverable by March 2024. Task 4 is to identify and discuss the data regarding education and awareness. We, as a committee, we have 3 gentlemen on our panel
who are actually returned citizens. And what we're hearing from them is that there's a lack of awareness of persons of color who are in the community about where do I go to get these services, right? And so that's what we want to focus on next. What are the available resources and access points to give this information out, and how do we make sure we're getting it out there in an effective way? Thanks. So our pre-incarceration solutions, again, we're looking at what are the current stigmas, why aren't African-American people engaging in services while they're in the community, understanding what are the needs while they're incarcerated, and then post-incarceration. And I think it definitely overlaps with the workforce committee, because if people are out and they're in the community, they still need their mental health taken care of. And we want people to feel free to be able to access the mental health services that they need once they're returned citizens. And then I think we've got a couple of proposed legislation for next year that we'll look at, and then advocating for passing legislation and any other letters that we need by the end of the year.
And we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge our honorary co-chair, Camille. She has been with us from the beginning, so we just want to acknowledge her efforts, her experience, her expertise, and everything she brings to the table. So this is a list of some of the organizations that our committee members belong to. As Terry said, we do have 3 individuals who are returning citizens, or as one of the individuals say, reintegrating citizens. But we also have a currently impacted citizen that is going to join our committee. He's currently incarcerated. He's been incarcerated since 1992. So he's going to join us and provide us with the insight that he has. So that's about it. I want to thank you guys for your attention.
Is this, okay. Hi, my question is, as a public defender, and great presentation, one of the things that we see missing for our clients is care that is stepped up. So when you're transitioning out of being incarcerated for a really long time, for example, I had a client recently backing up life, and the judge is sitting there saying, well, I don't know, Ms. Levy, I don't know where to put him because what he needs, we don't have. And there's gotta be some, and the response, the choice is life or a stepped up care, some kind of intensive outpatient that we can't find in the community. And so looking or taking a survey of what intensity of services are available for folks and finding ways to provide more.
Absolutely, and again, I work with Town Organization, and we have a very robust reentry program, shameless plug. But I will say that level of care is very important to establish what type of care an individual needs. So the research that we are doing, or our researcher is doing, is going to pull all the resources that we currently have. We're going to look at the gaps so that we can, again, propose what's missing.
Follow-up question to you. Piggybacking on what you said, Debbie, I'm curious if y'all looked at, and thinking about the availability of resources also, and thinking about your comment, I'm also thinking about sentencing, right? So is there anybody kind of looked at, like, do our judges have access to know about the resources to even recommend to, right, people coming to the system? Is that something, anything somebody looked at?
That's a great point. That's something that we need to look at. Being able to, being a part of an organization that supports returning citizens and being able to testify, there are times where the judges are very surprised at the services that are in the community because they have not been made aware. And a lot of times the clerks will ask me to email the information that we have, and those judges will utilize us as a resource. So that's a great point. So when we look at what's out there with the gaps are, we'll look at how to disseminate the information and make sure the right people have the right information.
Yeah, well, one of the big things that we looked at, and again, thanks to Camille Blakefall from the Maryland Department of Health, is one of the things we found out was that Medicaid is looking at changing a waiver that's going to allow people to get certain services set up while they're in prison. So when you walk out of prison, you don't just get 20 bucks in a bus pass. You're going to have access to it. You're going to have care set up. You're going to have your own, psychiatrist, therapist, group sessions, whatever, set up as soon as you walk out of prison. That's huge. Any other questions?
Thank you, Health and Human Services. And our last work group work plan presentation will be from the Law Enforcement Policies and Practices work group.
Okay, so again, my name's Debbie Levy. I co-chair the Law Enforcement Policies and Practices along with Heather Warnkin from the University of Baltimore and Phil Pincus from the OAG's office. If you guys can just wave your hands, okay. So I'm gonna just talk for a brief second about our mission statement. I know folks have skipped over it, but I think there is some time to be spent figuring out, or we think there's time to be spent analyzing how does law enforcement affect mass incarceration. So some of these committees may have an easier answer for that, and we want the folks on our committee or our work group to really examine the ways in which law enforcement policies and practices drive mass incarceration, not just racial disparities, but also what are some deep policies and procedures, training, how is this impacting in the community to affect mass incarceration. We have identified 6 areas of focus for our work group. The first is really to examine racial disparity in policing and how police contribute to mass incarceration, looking at data around stops, searches, arrests, guns, and drug enforcement, and then really taking a look at the history of policing. We have the belief that we should all sort of come from the same place in terms of our education about this issue, and so we want to spend some time looking backwards. What does policing mean in America? Where did we come from? How did we develop? And where are we now? The second is to reduce the policing footprint and examining ways to minimize law enforcement contact with the public. So reducing circumstances where people encounter law enforcement in the first place, probably piggybacking with the work group that just went before us, talking about mental health crises and should law enforcement officers be folks who are responding, looking at alternative models for crisis intervention, not just with a police officer armed with a weapon or somebody trained with a mental health background. And then our sort of, I think one of the biggest ones we have is this very large category about improving transparency and accountability for policing. The first topic is to collect data and disseminate, making police misconduct data public and available. Obviously, I don't know if all of you know that Maryland was the first state in the country to pass the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights in the 1970s. We were the first state in the country to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. We have now taken a great step towards making police misconduct data public, but it's not yet available. So our committee really wants to focus on that and disseminate that data. We also want to examine financial accountability for misconduct, looking at how misconduct settlements are funded and where is the connection between that and preventing police misconduct. I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end. And we want to examine technology and policing. Where are we right now with AI coming out of the gate? Where are we with facial recognition? Is that increasing law enforcement's interaction with the public in a way that we need to pay attention to and try to curb? We also want to look at other criminal justice stakeholder training. We want to inject meaningful training into training sessions addressing bias for police officers. How can we get into the curriculum? How can we develop more impactful training modules to be a part of that? And then examine existing resources and effectiveness for de-escalation, procedural justice, trauma-informed policing, probability simulation. So we really don't have a lot to work on in this committee. Right, we have a lot. We also, and speaking of a lot, this next topic is identifying how prosecutorial policies contribute to racial disparities and mass incarceration. This is a question point for us. Prosecutors are law enforcement. They have badges. They are part of the umbrella of policing. And so our question is this for our committee? Is this down the road maybe a whole nother work group? Maybe that's a suggestion that we want to talk about down the road. But how do charging decisions by police and prosecutors contribute? How do we collaborate with criminal law and sentencing and other groups to look at ways prosecutor decisions impact mass incarceration in policing? And then we also want to look at examining police staffing. There is a lot of dialogue around police staffing in the country right now. We want to look at sort of all angles of that dialogue, bolstering community connection requirements and increasing diversity in policing in many areas.
Our timeline is not quite as ambitious as everybody else's. We really want our work group members to help us develop this timeline. And so we are in February reviewing the information by our committee members. We've given out lots of surveys to our members to really give us some significant feedback on our work group and our work plan. In March, we want to have work group members and staff work assignments. In March, we want to bring our group back together to finalize our work plan so we have some buy-in with everybody on our team. And then in April, we want to develop strategies and a focused agenda based on our first stage of research and a review of the issues. And then from there, we intend to revamp our timeline. And our membership, we are very proud of our membership. It spans from a currently incarcerated person also, whose conviction involved 3 individuals who are now either criminally charged or convicted law enforcement members. And we have victim advocates, the ACLU. We tried to get a very wide group of stakeholders, and I think we have achieved that. And then we have, I think we could turn the light on. The next thing that we just want to talk about is our very first deliverable for our committee. So Attorney General Brown was talking about making, not just creating legislative agenda, but we really want to have like meaningful activities that are spurring the conversation. So our group is super excited that our very first event for our work group is this coming Monday, next Monday, March 4th. We have secured UCLA law professor Joanna Schwartz, who is author of Shielded, How the Police Became Untouchable. So this is 2 decades of scholarship and research looking at how law enforcement settlements and how police misconduct accountability has not yet affected the kind of change that we want to see. She's a very compelling speaker. It's research-based. I'll just read one of the responses in the front. This is, whatever you believe about the police in the United States, you need to read Shielded. This book is an essential tool for addressing one of the country's most pressing and wrenching problems, and that's by Emily Bazelon, author of Charged, The New Movement to Transform American Prosecution and End Mass Incarceration. So it's completely on point. It's a brand new dialogue on how are we going to affect change and find a new way to look at a recurring problem. And so you folks are all invited. Our Law Enforcement Policies and Practices Committee has first dibs at the seats. Seats are limited. We're going to send you an invite. It's in the University of Maryland Carey School of Law at 8:30 on Monday, March 4th. You'll be able to meet the author, mingle, and then a Q&A afterwards. You'll see an invite coming soon, and grab your seat. Questions?
What time is the Monday event?
8:30 to 10:30. And at this moment, it's in the Krongard room. AM, 8:30 AM. Thank you. It's not like the better Darby. All right.
Let me just say something. Thank you very much for the presentation. Let me say something about timeline. So all the work groups have presented and they have timelines which are important. And I think the co-chairs have been in conversations with Christian and Willie, and timelines geared towards producing product. Producing product. I don't want to say report, but something by the end of this year. But keep in mind, this collaborative will not end at the end of this year. This collaborative is not going to end in 5 years. This collaborative isn't going to end in 15 years. I sit on a council. I won't name the council, but it looks at sort of like making our community safe. And things have been in existence since 1995 and still producing great recommendations, legislation, budget, partnerships, and all that. So as I was listening to the work group presentations, some of them very ambitious, which is great, keep in mind that this will not be the only year that we'll be working on these issues. So I encourage each of the work groups, as you're working with the participants, prioritize what makes sense to get done this year, and then certainly set it up for what we'll be doing in next year and the out years.
Absolutely. So thank you again to all the work groups. Are there any other questions or comments before you move on? All right. If everyone can refer to your guidelines, you should have a copy. If not, I believe, Anissa, do we have any extras in the back? Work group, anybody didn't have one? I mean, guidelines, excuse me. Yeah, there's some extras there. So these guidelines will help structure our work over the next 15 to 20 plus years. I'm going to hit some of the high points on it. I know you all, obviously you all have read it. So starting, I'm on page 2, starting with just the goal. Maybe just reminding us what is the goal and what is the purpose of what we're doing. So everybody on page 2. Oh.
So before we jump into the meat of it, I think it is really important that we take a moment and look at what the values are of the collaborative. And that should be what really grounds us in all the work, in the respective work groups that we do, and how we move and how we engage with one another, but as also how we engage with other partners. So I really want to emphasize that the values that should guide the collaborative work should be really deeply rooted in integrity, respect, accessibility, inclusiveness, fairness, equity, diversity, empathy, justice, compassion, professionalism, and also understanding. And I just really thought that was important that we emphasize that as we move through this work.
Thank you, Madam Defender. All right, with those values established, looking at our mission statement and goal. So again, as everyone is aware, Maryland has the worst racial disparities in the country, with over 71% of our prison and jail population being African American. So really the kind of twin goals of MEJC are twofold. We are addressing the actual racial disparities in our system, and we're working to reduce the overall level of incarceration. The other pieces of this work will be tracking and adoption of our proposals. So by January 2025, we'll be producing a report which will detail the origins of this crisis in Maryland and how we got here, and kind of help explain it to explain to the public and our various different audiences. And that will also include, again, the proposals that are approved, the proposals from the work groups that are approved by the collaborative. So those will be the main components of the report. In January, then we will go on a process of advocating for the proposals. And what this looks like is, again, going to school board meetings, talking to private stakeholders, and going to the legislature. But I just want to emphasize, as the principal has said, we have many different audiences. There's lots of administrative items, like Secretary Schroeder mentioned, where we can put a big dent in this issue just with administrative items. We'll be talking to private companies. We'll be talking to different local governments. So really, again, our collaborative audience is really very wide. So are there any questions on the why or what we're doing or what our goal is for the collaborative? I guess we're kind of emphasize, really, again, this will be ongoing. So we're kind of, what we talked about is having, again, maybe cycles of research, such as that we're doing this year, followed by maybe cycles of advocacy for the proposals and going back. So just to give you guys a vision of what it's going to look like. Moving on to, I'm now on page 3, which is starting the collaborative member roles and responsibilities at the bottom of page 3, top of page 4. I just want to briefly touch on what is expected of you all as a member of the collaborative. First, disclosing conflicts not just conflicts, actual potential or perceived conflicts to the collaborative co-chairs, so making sure that they're aware of that. attending at least 75% of scheduled meetings in a 12-month period. So for our collaborative meetings, again, attending at least 3 out of 4 of the meetings, but you will have that scheduled in advance. Supporting proposals and initiatives adopted by the collaborative. So this collaborative is not intended to affect or stop or the work that you all are doing in your individual organizations. But again, the expectation is once the collaborative has adopted these proposals in January, that you'll use your advocacy and resources and other assistance to help support the passage of these proposals. And then finally, this is something new. This was voluntary, but now it's a kind of voluntold. We're asking every collaborator to join at least one work group. And I understand if you're not currently part of one, we can work with you on the schedule, et cetera. But just to help with the cohesion of the collaborative and the working, day-to-day work, we're going to ask for tighter collaboration between the collaborative and the work group. So again, we'll be asking every collaborator to join at least one work group. Were there any questions? Any questions about the member roles and responsibilities? All right, I am moving ahead to I'm at the bottom of page 6, which is quorum, consensus, and voting. And if there's anything along in between that you have a question about, please let me know. So yeah, section 8, quorum, consensus, and voting. They got the public communication.
Sure, I just wanted us to go back to the guidance on public communication by collaborative members. If we could take a moment and just look at those paragraphs. So there may be times where your respective agencies or programs or groups have a view that differs from the collaborative. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as you review that. So especially when we think about our respective roles, and also that we're members of the collaborative and may represent a particular work group, that there may be an issue that is prevalent in current media, to really be cognizant of your role as a member of the work group versus a member of the collaborative versus a member of your respective organizations. So are there any particular questions in regards to communications? I think that's an important one to highlight. Yes, questions?
I mean, I would assume.
Here we go.
I guess this is easier question for me because you're my principal and I'm on the collaborative. We have community members also, but for me, I take that to mean we don't speak for the collaborative unless we've cleared a public statement through the collaborative all the way up to the top. And so that's what I'm hearing is the expectation.
Yes.
And so then if I have I think that just requires communication then for all of the co-chairs, and that we all make sure that we're all doing that together, so that, because that is the unique quality that we don't all have a principal. So I was just sort of advocating for that position, that we all come back to the principals with questions on public statement. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Yes, and you should also be speaking with members of your work group that are not necessarily present here today in regards to the communication policy.
Thank you. Any other questions on this portion? All right, if I can direct your attention to at the bottom of page 6 with quorum, consensus, and voting. So so just to remind everyone that going back to the vision of the collaborative, it was always about bringing groups and organizations with opposing views or that don't ordinarily work together to come together for reform and really find out, where the consensus items and where we can agree. So the way we have defined consensus in the context of the collaborative is a consensus is reached when a proposal is supported by the general agreement of an overwhelming majority of members. Now at the work group level, what this means is the way for proposal will only move forward with consensus. So as you'll see here, just that the work groups you're in your work groups having a discussion. The idea would be again kind of a thorough deliberation and discussion, and after that, the work group co-chairs will kind of help assess the conversation and discuss with the members and decide what the kind of consensus position is. So am I making sense, or I need to clarify some more? Yes, no? No, okay. So there's not gonna, so basically, the work group puts together, if the work group advances a proposal, they will advance the proposal in whole kind of to the leadership group. The leadership team. The leadership team will then kind of help assess and work together on what the consensus is, what the consensus position is, and then forward that to the executive work group, which will be comprised of all the co-chairs here. So and at the collaborative level, there will be a formal vote. So at the work group and other levels, to advance the proposal, there needs to be consensus. And again, even if there is a consensus, the entire proposal is going to put forward for the leadership and executive groups, leadership team and executive work groups to work out. But again, at the collaborative level, there will be a formal vote for proposals to come out of there. So if you're already part of an existing committee, your committee membership is not changing. We are converting them to work groups, but again, then you're still part of the juvenile justice reform work group. The difference will be, again, we'll have some collaborative members joining that work group, but the co-chairs will remain the same. And those collaborative members will be part of the discussion on what advances forward, just so again, we're better coordinating and that again, our collaborative members are even more involved in the work. The other piece is existing members will also still have a part as participants in the work group. So you'll all be kind of discussing, still researching, still doing data, but the difference is again, at the work group level, we'll have more collaborative members involved. Any questions?
To clarify, so the committees that are part of the collaborative are now work groups?
Correct. Co-chairs will remain the same. You'll have some collaborative members who aren't part of one, they'll be joining the work groups. And also, again, there won't be voting at the work group level, it will be by consensus. But that doesn't mean, again, that the proposal doesn't move forward. If there's let's say the work group agrees on 80% of the proposal, let's say you all agree on 80% of things, you disagree on your 20%. In that report you're sending to the leadership team, you'll kind of have a detailed narrative of, all right, we agree with the 80, et cetera, here's the points where we disagree with. And as it moves forward, the leadership team will work on it. And again, if it's still not resolved, the executive work group will work on finding consensus. So that's part of the vision of how it will work. Any other questions? So again, just one more piece before we move on to the proposal form. This will be the order of operations for how proposals move forward. They will begin at the work group level, and when they're ready, they'll be submitted to the leadership team for their review. And once the leadership team approves that, it will move to the executive work group and then the collaborative. And the final piece related to this is the proposal form, which you all should have a copy of, and I can go over review. So you should, it's not on the slide, but you should have a physical copy of the MEJC work group proposal form. So this proposal form is to help the work groups with their work. This is the type of information that the collaborative needs to consider a proposal. So again, we really want to encourage the kind of data and research and rigor around all proposals. So again, looking at some of these questions, such as the background information, we want to know, what is the current state of the law and what is the history of this issue. We want to know the data that demonstrate the need to address this now. Some of the other pieces are stakeholders, and that will be very important again, as we move forward, because the key, I can tell you now that if I can tell you now that again, that the leadership team and the executive work group will also be looking for the type of a variety of stakeholders that each work group is talked to. So that'll be something they're looking for, is that we talk to a wide variety of people, are well sourced. The target audience is important. And again, we want to emphasize that these proposals should, will be not just legislation, but possible administrative items and items for the private sector to tackle. Time horizon. Impact is also very important. Again, one of those two questions that we're kind of tackling with this collaborative, which is the diversity and the overall diversity of the system and the overall level of incarceration. And then finally, another important question is potential obstacles. Has it been tried before? Will it be really expensive? Really, again, this report that we're producing will be not only, again, for the public, for the legislature. And in order to make that case, it'll be really important to kind of have a very thorough data-filled and very thorough proposal. So that's part of some of the questions we're asking on this. Any questions?
So, though there were no actual questions, I felt like I saw some question marks on some faces, especially when we showed the transition. So if you can go back to that slide, and if you look at the last page, on the back of the last page, it defines the groups. So I think if you look at the definition of the groups, and then look at the flow chart, it'll come together a little bit better. Elizabeth? I'm looking at you, yeah.
I actually have one other procedural question. There's a section here that talks about whether, since there will be no voting by proxy, however, absent members may be represented by another designee of the same organization. Something that we had noticed in one of the now work groups was that we had many representatives of one organization and not so many of another. So the question we've asked ourselves, and we're not certain if we were answering it the way the leadership would like us to answer it, was whether one organization would have outsized weight in a work group because it had sent many representatives and each of them could vote, or if it would be voting in effect by stakeholders. For example, if the public defender sent 10 representatives and there was only one from the Attorney General's office and 2 advocates, does that mean the public defender could control the decisions of the group because it had just flooded the playing field for the representatives?
First of all, you underestimate the might of the Office of the Attorney General. 1 to 10, we take those odds any day.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was actually a hypothetical. I could have went back and seen how many issues there were.
No, I think that's one of the reasons why we did get away from voting, because we want that sort of like, free-flowing exchange of ideas and views. And when you sort of reduce things to voting, then you start saying, well, okay, 10 of you are here from the same organization, but only 1 of you can vote, and then 9 people feel excluded.
The key word in the language that's been given is overwhelming. It's the overwhelming sentiment of the group. Again, that how strong the sentiment of the group is may be influenced by how many representatives there are.
And that's why we're going to defer really to the judgment of the co-chairs to make that determination.
Yeah, hi. This is the curse of having an extremely expressive face. My law school professors always told me I was like their meter for whether the class understood, and Public Defender Darty watched me get more confused as I was reading the back of this paper. Yes, I do have a question. Just to clarify, the work, so the work groups got that. Then the leadership team is the principals, the attorney general, the public defender, and their designated staff. And then the executive work group is expanding again to include, so it's sort of like a small, big, small situation. Is that, am I interpreting this correctly? Okay, great. I don't know if that made sense, but okay.
So in terms of the work group, I also wanted to emphasize that the work group will contain members of the collaborative, but you are also able to invite participants. So individuals that you want to come in to provide additional expertise, share ideas, provide whatever research and information, you can essentially bring them into the work group for part of that discussion. It is just when we get to the point of consensus, and trying to find consensus, then you want to narrow it down to your members as to who is part of that discussion. But the work group is not limited to just collaborative members. So hopefully that made it clearer. I won't look at the list anymore. Any other questions? Yes.
There you go.
Okay. So, if a working group proposal comes to the collaborative and we have questions, so we want more data or we want more research, can we send it back for more research? Absolutely.
So another question, perhaps not directly on point here, is to the extent that the committees already have made some recommendations to the collaborative, two of the committees today in our presentations or through the work groups had recommendations of what we consider high consensus items. That is not on the agenda for today. To the extent that high consensus items are in a few cases, legislation pending before the current session in the General Assembly, this being a week or two away from crossover day. Is that something, the existing recommendations, that the collaborative leadership is going to take up? And if so, how might we take it up in the future?
Yes, so regarding, so yes, I'm acknowledging we are short on time, but acknowledging the recommendations for this session, I would say if you all are able to meet this proposal or kind of adapt it, I'd say full steam ahead. But also to the point of the principals, even if we aren't having activities this spring, absolutely by next spring we'll be ready, we'll be prepared, etc. But I guess I'm saying, yeah, if you all are able to.
So to clarify, when we had the first meeting and the Attorney General spoke and said we were going to look for high consensus items that could be done this spring, and there have been high consensus items presented. They're not on the agenda, and the Attorney General today made some comments about how legislation is complex. I don't think anyone would disagree that it's complex, but the question is whether the leadership has de facto rejected all recommendations of the existing committees or work groups that have been submitted as high consensus items, or whether we are in fact going to talk about them and consider them at some point before this session is over.
So, a high consensus item, the term that was used during the launch, create a lot of confusion for people. What does that mean? Particularly if we're not voting, if we do vote, what percentage it is. And during the course of sort of like considering that, we came up with this work group proposal format. So whether something's high consensus or not, it needs to come to the collaborative accompanied with this type of proposal worksheet. So everybody on the collaborative, because a high consensus item may come out of a work group, one work group out of the 7, and then you've got members who were not in that work group, and they're like, what is this? We hear that it's high consensus coming out of this group, but what is it? What's the data? Who are the stakeholders? What is the impact? What are the obstacles, et cetera? So it's not that a high consensus item can't come to the collaborative now, but whatever comes to the collaborative has to be accompanied with something like this, so that everyone can consider the kinds of information that's included on this proposal format.
Would we have an opportunity to make a presentation on our,
will we have opportunities as a work group to make a presentation to the leadership team or the executive team in person so that we can field questions and it not just be a paper proposal?
I think there are times when that is going to be necessary and appropriate. There may be times where a proposal on paper is fairly clear, so probably on a case by case.
And as we are talking about this and answering questions, I think the flow chart may be tweaked, because now that it's brought to my attention, I think it's work group, executive work group, leadership team, and then collaborative, just in terms of kind of the, big fiddle to big again. So we'll work out the flow, but, so I will say that we took charge, and essentially what was great was that everybody jumped in and began working. And now we're at the point where we're establishing, okay, organizationally, how we are going to proceed so that each of the work groups are working in a similar fashion, and that when we present ideas, we're presenting ideas that are organized to everyone. And I would say in my day job, I'm very much about, what is the data and the research and the evidence say to support the position. So in terms of proposals that have high consensus, I would say, and as already been said, if you're able to meet these criteria and present them, I would say absolutely do so. But it's really important as we come out of the gate that we are making sure that our stuff is data-driven, evidence-based, and supported.
So if we were to do such a thing, to fill out the MEJC work group proposal form and begin the 4-step process, does the leadership have any concept of time frame or when another meeting would be? I'm getting the impression basically that the leadership has decided there will be no high consensus items this spring because of, in essence, the timing of the new procedural steps that have been inserted. And I would welcome you clarifying if that is the case, or if, in fact, there is some idea that the original launch concept of high consensus items that could be considered in the spring could be considered in the spring.
So I would say we meet in person. However, if there was a proposal that was able to fulfill what we needed to fulfill, then we could meet in Zoom. There's nothing to say that we have to meet in person in order to do this. If we wanted to meet in person, that would be a challenge. That would likely not happen before the deadline in terms of things before Annapolis. But if there was something ripe and ready for consideration that could possibly be done by Zoom. And I would like to say for the record, there was nothing that was pre-decided, because essentially it's the work of the committee and each of the co-chairs as to how quickly, how things move. But we wanted to make sure that whatever moved forward was evidence-based and solid, because we are really traversing in new ground and are going to face challenges from various entities. And we want to make sure that the work that we put forth is evidence-based and solid, so that those who are dependent upon us, and there's entire communities that are, know that we are serious, and that we're moving in good faith, and that we're moving soundly.
Since we're all here, and I feel like we're coming towards the end of the agenda, I wonder if any of the co-chairs anticipate a high consensus item, so that we could say it out loud while we're all sitting in the same room.
Yeah, I would say from the Prison Jail Detention Reform Committee, we gave 3. All 3 are evidence-based, with massive research from the Pew Institute for one of them, with the example of 20 other states in the federal government on the second one, and as to the third one, it's a technical correction of something that previously was passed by the legislature and is the system of 47 other states in the United States, with Maryland as an outlier. So I think that there is good evidentiary support. Our work group or committee did not know about the group proposal plan and was not sure what would or would not be on the agenda, or we would have done it before. But I think at least those 3 proposals are in the nature of high consensus items, well supported by evidence and precedents elsewhere. And I hope that the process would permit them to be considered, because all 3 are before the Maryland General Assembly this spring. I know in the Criminal Law and Sentencing Committee, there are a large collection of proposals. Many of them are rule changes, and may not therefore be time sensitive the same way that the legislative proposals that are pending are. So I'm only speaking, I think, for the prison, jail, and detention worker.
So I will say, and thank you for that. So a couple of things that brings me to mind. So outside of your work group meeting, it's important that co-chairs are communicating amongst one another, because before the formal meeting, there are co-chairs that were aware of the proposals. They may not have been aware before a work group meeting, but there are some co-chairs that did know about this, so it's really important that co-chairs are communicating amongst one another. I'm sorry, the different work
All
groups.
the different workers.
Yes.
Should be communicating all the.
Well, no. At least amongst, there's 3 of you, so you should be communicating amongst the 3 of you to make sure that information is shared. And I have no problem putting the onus on the public defender co-chairs to make sure that everybody has the same information at the same time. I will also say that what is important is also in terms of when we come together as a collaborative, that everyone has the same information so that they can make an intelligent decision in terms of the discussion. So I know those who are from the Office of the Public Defender are versed in what you are saying, but there may be others in this collaborative who are not as well versed in terms of those three issues that you are presenting. So it's really important when we talk about these proposals that we're not only bringing it together, but we're sharing it in the group so we can have a hearty, intelligent exchange of information. So even though you are spot on, and the Ombudsman, the Attorney General in his role, and myself as a public defender, we both testified in favor of those bills. There are members of the collaborative who are not as versed, and they should be given the opportunity to have this information so that they can make their independent decision as to whether or not that is something they believe the collaborative should move forward on.
Just to keep following up on that, we have 3 high consensus items coming out of that group. I want to say this out loud to make sure I got it right. They now do something that looks like this work group proposal that they submit to the executive work group, because that's coming second, then the leadership team, then the full collaborative.
So essentially,
That's right.
if we can just drop things into an email and then shoot it out to your co-chairs, and the co-chairs send it up the chain, that's something that seems that we can send it out and people can have the opportunity to just digest it and we can move forward.
So this meeting that we're going to have virtually in order to go over this, is that just a meeting that's going to be a course correction just as we started, or is there going to be a process and a procedure for these kind of ad hoc meetings if issues come up, and when would that be?
So are you referring to sort of recommendations that may come up from a work group, not waiting until the end of the year?
Yeah.
Yep. So we have quarterly meetings scheduled. Our next one is June, and then when is the one after that, Kristen?
September 5th.
So there's a schedule of quarterly meetings, and that's certainly an opportunity to bring up issues that don't necessarily have to wait until end of year. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that. But not that much. No, I guess what I was asking was, I shouldn't have said yes so quickly. So if there are other issues that come up in between quarterly meetings, are they forevermore in the future going to have to wait until the next quarterly meeting? Or will there be, just like we're going to do with these 3 high consensus items, some sort of process for emergency meetings?
Yeah, it's in the guidelines. Yeah. So I think the answer is yes. We can collaborate, if you will, and take action.
Special meetings, yeah.
Special meetings, yeah. There's special meetings. It's in the collaborative. Yeah.
Thank you.
Section 7, page 6.
I would just say that we'll probably add some type of notice timeline so that it's not like Monday, can we get together on Friday type of thing. But there will be special meetings.
Sorry to keep drilling down on this, but it sounds like there's a lot of communication that goes between the leadership team and the co-chairs. But I'm representing the secretary who is, I don't believe, on the leadership team or a co-chair. So to the extent, and there's a subgroup that she's on workforce, which is close in her sweet spot. Is there some chance, will the work group members be looped in so they know if a recommendation is not being supported or something totally different comes up, or is there some chance that she would be caught by surprise? Is what I'm aiming at. Or any other work group member who's not a co-chair?
So the work group co-chair should be communicating with all individuals who are in the work group. So it's really going to be important that you have that contact information of the different persons in your work group. So if you have a meeting, it would be great if you send out minutes to your those on your work group so that they're aware of what is happening, and nothing not necessarily detailed, just so those who were not present, so they have an idea as to what moved forward, what was discussed, what didn't move forward. That would be great.
Thank you.
I'll just add for those who maybe knew that every work group also has a volunteer staff. And again, one of the roles of the volunteer staff consisting of staff liaisons, researcher, and note taker. So really, again, we are expecting the work groups to utilize your staff liaisons and other staff to put more information out there to keep us informed, et cetera. So just want to provide for everyone knew that every work group does have volunteer staff. Any other questions? Just about the collaborative in general?
So thank you again, everybody. Some really great questions. And when you have such a large group of persons coming together, it's really important that we have these exchanges to really flush out some of the details. So all those questions are definitely appreciated, and look out for whatever updates that we have. I'm sure that committee is going to get us some information the next couple of days, so definitely look out for your email so that we can move forward on that. Some key takeaways that I had from this meeting, and I hope that you also share with me, in that bringing together a diverse group of people is really the key to our success. And it can be challenging at times, not only the subject matter, but the different personalities that have come together. But I really want you to remember the purpose for which we have come together, and that everyone brings a certain level of expertise and knowledge. And as we engage with one another, making sure that we are being kind to one another, and that we are respecting that in the interactions that we have. I also was excited to listen here today because a lot of why we brought this collaborative together is already happening, and essentially it's the breaking down of silos and sharing of information. The gentleman, and I'm sorry, I will learn your name, but from the Department of Labor, just things that he shared that I know from us in the Office of the Public Defender that we were not aware. So just how invaluable this short couple of hours have been, and how great it is that we have come together to share what we know are the knowledge and expertise. I also heard, and I think it was saying from the good gentleman from Department of Labor, how we must capture the good as we're working to change the bad. And I really want to lead with that being our motto, that as we're fighting this fight, it's really important that what we see is good, that we do hold on to it, because there are some good things that need support. When we think about services and interventions that are provided, those are the good things, and we must also think about how we can provide supports in those areas. So keep that in mind. And another really important point, I remember when the Attorney General came to me and like, yeah, you know what, we're going to end mass incarceration. And I'm like, yes, we're going to end mass incarceration, but when you think about how just a tremendous thing that is, but what is really exciting, especially in listening to the presentations, how each of you have taken such a enormous task and broken it down to really biteable, small portions, is really exciting because it did not all come together overnight. It was these different systems that came together cumulatively to get us to the place that we are, and it's going to take us chiseling piece by piece in these respective areas to really get the work done. So thank you. I'm encouraged by all of you. Hopefully you are encouraged by this gathering and are inspired to continue to work together harder, better. Please sign up for March the 4th. That is going to be a great program. It is open to the collaborative members first, so please sign up. And we look to be engaging and having those type of programming as well to support you in this mission and this work. And that's all I got.
I'll just repeat, capturing the good as we lead to end the bad. Look, you've all taken on an enormous responsibility. Everyone's got a day job and other things that we do, and that you're spending the time and committing the time to the important work of this collaborative. I thank you. I know we have some folks in the public who've come. Thank you very much for your attendance, and to those watching us streaming, we appreciate your interest as well. Thank you, everybody.